Hi, you are watching Voice of Canada and this is Sana Haroon. Manitoba Premier Brian Pallister has confirmed on won't be seeking re-election and has asked his party to start work on finding a new leader.
For my family, and for our party, and for Manitoba too.
Pallister made a brief announcement and took no questions from reporters after a Progressive Conservative caucus meeting.
Pallister dropping the announcement in Brandon late Tuesday. The Premier touting his recent accomplishments in his statements, including 2 back-to-back large majority wins, balancing the budget, lowering taxes, as well as investments in healthcare, education, and family services. Pallister also saying he's proud of running a, quote, scandal-free government. He came under fire recently for comments he made about Canada's colonial history, but he did apologize for those comments in a statement issued last week. He also says there was no easy time to make the decision to leave or enter public life, but the right time to leave is now.
So by stepping aside at the midpoint in our second mandate, I believe this will provide sufficient time for not only for party members to choose a new leader, but for Manitobans to get to know that new leader and new Premier as well, so that we can keep moving this province forward together.
Chinese courts are set to hand out verdicts in the cases of 2 Canadian nationals who have been detained in that country.
For one of the Canadians caught in the political crossfire between China and Canada comes the worst possible news. Robert Schellenberg, arrested in China for drug trafficking in 2014, was initially sentenced to 15 years, but that was upgraded to a death sentence in January 2019, 1 month after the arrest of Meng Wanzhou in Vancouver at the request of the United States. Schellenberg appealed, but on Tuesday, Canada's ambassador to China said the court upheld the death sentence. Also revealed one of the 2 Michaels, Michael Spavor, accused of spying just days after Meng's arrest, will learn his fate on Wednesday. Final days of her court hearing. A BC Supreme Court judge will rule later this year on whether to extradite her to the United States. Kevin and Julia Garrett were also accused of spying and detained in China back in 2014, following the arrest of a Chinese national. Schellenberg's family said they remain hopeful that the diplomatic efforts between Canada and China will bring about the best possible outcome for Bob. He was convicted of spying, but then released in 2016. At the time, Canada's relations with China were looking up amid talk of a possible trade deal. Not anymore.
We are approaching a point where it won't be safe for Canadians, including Olympic athletes, to travel to China.
In a statement, Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister condemned Schellenberg's arbitrary sentence. The Chinese embassy responded, telling Canada to respect its judicial sovereignty and stop making any irresponsible remarks and embarrassing itself.
Afghans trying to flee the Taliban through a special Canadian immigration program have been left behind at Kabul airport after learning they need a valid passport to exit the country, according to a group helping them.
The government says this flight at Toronto's Pearson Airport last week is one of many in the works bringing thousands of Afghan refugees to Canada, a belated effort to pay back interpreters and others who helped save Canadian lives during the Afghan mission. People whose lives are in greater danger than ever with the Taliban's resurgence. But in helping those they left behind, Canadian officials have encountered obstacles. Interpreters and their families are being confronted by COVID rules and passport requirements they didn't know existed when they arrive at the Kabul airport, often on short notice, for their flights to Canada. He says about 20 families are stuck and afraid they could be killed. Firuz Mohammed knows what's at stake. He was an interpreter for the Canadian Army in Kandahar. His father-in-law, also an interpreter, was assassinated by the Taliban. The government says all Afghans arriving through the new program are tested for COVID-19 before leaving Afghanistan and are tested again upon arrival in Canada. But there's growing pressure on the Department of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship to cut through the chaos. In a statement, the department says every effort is being made to put approved applicants on planes as quickly as possible, and that the Government of Canada must also abide by the rules established by the host government, and we are working collaboratively to address issues that have delayed the departure of some individuals. In a conflict that still provokes mixed feelings among Canadians, Even the aftermath is shrouded in confusion.
Conservative Party leader Aaron Otoli urged Canada to consider boycotting the 2022 Beijing Olympics on Tuesday, one day after a Chinese court upheld the death penalty for a Canadian man who had been detained.
I need to take a minute to comment on the news about our fellow Canadians Robert Schellenberg and Michael Spavor. The denial of Robert Schellenberg's appeals must be seen for what it is: a foreign government planning to take the life of a Canadian for political reasons. The use of the death penalty is abhorrent, but to impose it for political reasons is inexcusable. We will be watching tonight's verdict, and we won't be alone. The Chinese Communist Party needs to know that the world is watching, and we will be asking tough questions. Canadians just enjoyed celebrating the amazing achievements of our athletes in Tokyo. I know how hard our athletes are training for Beijing, but we are approaching a point where it won't be safe for Canadians, including Olympic athletes, to travel to China. The outcomes of the Spavor and Kovrig cases will help us answer that question. Yes, Canada should be considering a boycott, and I've said we're going to be watching the decisions very closely. Beijing has to know that the world is watching the genocide taking place against the Uyghurs. They've watched what's been happening in Hong Kong, and the situation with Mr. Schellenberg, Mr. Spavor, and Mr. Kovrig. The world is watching, and we're proud of our athletes. We're celebrating, but we also have to recognize the actions of a country that wants to host the games to bring people together. And we'll have to think long and hard on whether we reward a country like that with the games. Now is not the time for an election. Now is the time to make sure we're ready for the risks of a fourth wave. Health and the economic well-being of our country needs to be paramount. And I've asked Mr. Trudeau to put that first. I'm worried that the Liberals will put their political interests ahead of the national interests. We are talking about ideas for the future, but right now we have to keep...
After over a year of border closures due to COVID-19, fully vaccinated tourists from the United States are finally being allowed into Canada as pandemic travel restrictions ease.
At the world's longest land border, long lines beat the sunrise.
We reached here at 5:55 in the morning.
For many reasons, many fully vaccinated Americans were eager to get into Canada on the first day possible.
Worth the wait. We're going to our cottage.
Just moving for school. Been almost 2 years. So grandparents, great-grandparents for the kids.
They came by car, even by bike.
After 1 year, I'm going to visit my family.
And of course, by plane. And while the opening may be long overdue for many, there are concerns as cases in the United States skyrocket, now topping 100,000 a day. Here's a look at the United States versus India. Canada just extended its ban on direct flights from India to September 21st. That was due to the Delta variant, which originated there, but Indian cases have since dropped off dramatically. Public health professor says rapid testing needs to be more accessible first, and she's worried about children with an increase in American pediatric COVID. Dr. Isaac Bogosh stresses vaccines are working, and while it's true a vaccinated person can still transmit the virus, it's less likely.
If you're going to take a first step in opening the border, this would be an appropriate first step to do so. This is about as safe as it gets and as cautious as it gets.
Team Canada saw one of its best Summer Olympic performances ever at the Tokyo Games, racking up a total of 24 medals.
Drag those knees up. That's it.
16-year-old Caden Lee from Surrey, BC, has been running for several years, and he gets inspiration from the best.
I was following closely with Andre DeGrasse. His 200 was the most impressive.
In the under-18 category, Caden recently broke a Thunderbird Track and Field Club record for a mile run that was set back in 1984. As the Tokyo Olympics wrap up and Canadian athletes head for home, some of the youngest superstars, including Canada's most decorated Olympian, swimmer Penny Alexiak, have a message for those who will follow their own dreams. At age 14, Summer McIntosh is Canada's youngest Olympian. She says it was never too early for her to look to the future. Director at Western University's International Center for Olympic Studies says we need to build on the success of this Summer Olympics.
3, 2, 1.
As for Caden, could an Olympics be in his future?
After months of speculation in Ottawa over a possible federal election, there's anticipation that call could come any day now.
With pandemic restrictions easing across the country, cities are coming back to life. But a federal election is looming on the horizon, and it seems the average Canadian would rather hit a patio than head to the polls. Ricker says recent surveys show the majority of Canadians believe the pandemic won't be done even in the next year. So, if an election is called soon, he cautions the Liberals against making the ballot question about how the government managed the pandemic response. To that end, the number of cases of COVID-19 are on the rise, with the Delta variant continuing to spread. Now, there have been successful provincial elections during the pandemic, even before vaccines were available. That's why this former Liberal strategist says opposition parties can't criticize the Liberals if they do trigger a vote.
So that's a tough thing if you're the leader.
In those votes, BC Premier John Horgan converted his minority government into a majority, as did Blaine Higgs in New Brunswick. Those successes may be what's motivating Prime Minister Trudeau as he watches his poll number. Could be a risk the Prime Minister believes is worth taking.
After being closed to non-essential travel for over a year, the Canada-US border is finally set to reopen on Monday, allowing entry to fully vaccinated Americans and permanent residents.
506 days. That's how long these border bridges have been closed to Americans wanting to come to Canada. Only essential travelers have been allowed to cross since the beginning of the pandemic. Starting Monday, American travelers who follow new rules are welcome to cross again.
Be deemed to be fully vaccinated and also understand it has to be one of the Health Canada approved vaccines.
For border businesses here, it's like nearby Niagara-on-the-Lake, that means more people going for carriage ride. At the local Irish pub, many Americans were regulars. World-famous Shaw Festival, the theater staged its first indoor production in more than a year on Saturday night. Americans usually make up 40% of the audience. Yet as Ontario's COVID-19 case numbers start creeping up again, but because visitors must be tested and vaccinated, a surge of tourists is not expected right away.
Keep watching Voice of Canada. For further updates, visit our website voiceofcanada.tv.